The dashboard clock glowed 12:47 a.m. when Garrett Ashford pulled his aging Honda Accord to the curb outside the Meridian Grand Hotel. Downtown Seattle was unusually quiet for a Friday night. The summer humidity hung thick in the air like an unwelcome blanket, the kind of oppressive heat that made shirts stick to skin and turned every breath into effort. Garrett killed the engine and stepped out, his knees protesting as they always did now. 38 years old, and his body already kept a detailed record of every hard landing, every forced march, every sacrifice he had made during his 12 years in the Army. He had been Captain Ashford once, a man who commanded respect with a single look and led soldiers through situations that would break lesser men. Now he drove strangers around the city for money. His passenger door opened, and Mrs. Kowalski emerged with her usual warm smile. She was a tiny woman in her 60s, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, her Polish accent still thick after 40 years in America. She worked brutal shifts at Swedish Medical Center, healing others while her own feet ached and her back screamed for rest. "Thank you so much, Garrett," she said, fumbling with her purse as she tried to manage both it and her work bag. "Those other drivers, they cancel on me all the time. You are the only reliable one." "Happy to help, Mrs. Kowalski." Garrett moved around to the trunk and retrieved her overnight bag. "Another double shift?" 14 hours this time." She gave a weary chuckle. "We are short-staffed again. But that is the job, yes? People need care no matter what time it is." Garrett knew all about that kind of dedication. That sense of duty that pushed you beyond exhaustion because someone else was counting on you. It was the same drive that had him out here at nearly 1 in the morning, hunting for fares instead of sleeping. Because his 9-year-old son, Kieran, needed new shoes. Because the electricity bill was not going to pay itself. Because the Army pension helped, but it was never quite enough. He handed Mrs. Kowalski her bag, and she pressed a $20 bill into his hand despite his protests. "The app already charged you," he said. "That is a tip, young man, and I will not hear another word about it." She patted his arm with surprising firmness for such a small woman. "You have a son to take care of. Your wife would be proud of you." Corinne. The mention of her still hit like a physical blow. The cancer had stolen her piece by piece. And every day since, he had been learning how to be both parents to a boy who still sometimes called out for his mother in the middle of the night. Before Garrett could respond, a sound cut through the humid air that made his blood freeze. A scream, sharp, terrified. The kind of sound that bypassed rational thought and triggered pure instinct. Both he and Mrs. Kowalski froze, heads turning toward the source. Across the street, maybe 40 yards away at the crosswalk, a scene was unfolding under the harsh glow of the streetlights. A woman in a blue silk dress was on the ground. A figure loomed over her, a man in dark clothing with something covering his face. Even from this distance, Garrett could see the struggle, could see the man yanking at the woman's purse while she held on desperately, her heels making it impossible to find purchase on the wet pavement. Garrett's mind went sharp and focused. The same combat clarity that had saved his life and the lives of his soldiers more times than he could count. Time seemed to slow as he processed the situation in fractions of a second. The attacker had his back to them, focused entirely on his victim. The woman was fighting back, but losing. There were no other pedestrians visible, no police cars in sight, no help coming. "Call 911, Garrett said to Mrs. Kowalski, his voice shifting into the authoritative tone of Captain Ashford, the tone that had once commanded platoons through firefights. Then he was moving. His feet hit the pavement in a dead sprint, his body remembering the training even if his knees wished he would forget. The distance closed fast. 30 yards. 20. The woman's scream came again, higher pitched this time, edged with real fear as the attacker succeeded in ripping the purse from her grip. The man straightened, triumphant, the stolen bag clutched in his gloved hands. He was wearing a ski mask despite the heat, and through the eye holes, Garrett could see him glancing around, checking for witnesses. That was when he spotted Garrett charging across the street like a freight train with a personal vendetta. "Hey!" Garrett shouted, not slowing down. "Drop it!" The attacker's body language shifted instantly from predator to prey. He took one look at the 6'2" former soldier bearing down on him and made a calculation. He turned to run. He did not make it 3 steps. Garrett hit him with controlled violence and precise force. The tackle was textbook, the kind of thing they had drilled into him during basic training and that he had practiced 1,000 times in hand-to-hand combat courses. He wrapped his arms around the attacker's midsection, lifted him slightly off the ground, and drove him down hard onto the pavement. The impact knocked the wind out of both of them, but Garrett recovered faster. Years of muscle memory took over. He secured the attacker's right arm, twisting it up behind his back in a control hold that made any resistance extremely painful. The stolen purse skittered across the concrete, its contents spilling out in a trail of lipstick, keys, and a smartphone with a cracked screen. "Stay down," Garrett growled, applying just enough pressure to make his point clear. The attacker bucked once, trying to throw him off. But Garrett had 50 pounds on him and a lifetime of training in how to control a hostile combatant. He pressed down harder, his knee between the man's shoulder blades, and felt the fight drain out of him. And then the attacker said something that changed everything. "This isn't over, Miss Calloway," he hissed through the ski mask, his voice muffled but clear. "Your company owes me everything. I'll get what's mine, just like your kind always takes from people like me." He knew her name. This was not random. This was targeted. Before Garrett could process this information, the calculation changed again. The attacker clearly decided that whatever was in that purse was not worth getting arrested. With a sudden twist that caught Garrett by surprise, he wrenched free, leaving his jacket behind in Garrett's grip, and scrambled to his feet. Garrett moved to tackle him again, but the attacker was already running, stumbling slightly but finding his speed. He darted into the alley beside the hotel, and Garrett made a split-second decision not to pursue. The woman was still on the ground. She was the priority now, not revenge, not some misplaced sense of finishing the fight. He let the attacker go and turned back to where the woman sat on the pavement. Her blue silk dress was torn at the shoulder. One shoe was missing. Her eyes were wide with shock, and she was trembling violently, the adrenaline spike hitting her system hard now that the immediate danger had passed. "You okay, ma'am?" Garrett asked, his voice automatically gentling as he approached, the same voice he had used with frightened civilians in war zones. The same voice he used when Kieran woke up crying from nightmares. She stared at him, not speaking at first, just looking at him like he was something impossible. Her hair had come loose from whatever elegant style it had been in, falling in dark waves around her face. She was younger than he had initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that even in shock held remarkable intelligence. "I think so," she finally managed, her voice shaking. "I mean, yes, I'm not hurt. He didn't... You stopped him. He said my name. He knew who I was." "I heard." Garrett extended his hand. "Let's get you up off the street. We need to talk about what he said." She took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet with gentle firmness. She swayed slightly, and his other hand automatically went to her elbow to steady her. Up close, he could see she was dressed expensively, the kind of outfit that cost more than his monthly car payment. The blue silk dress, even torn, was clearly designer. Her jewelry, though simple, was real gold. "Your feet are bleeding," Garrett observed, looking down at where her torn stockings revealed scraped skin and broken heels. "I don't think I can walk." Garrett made a quick decision, the same kind of quick decisions that had kept his soldiers alive. He turned his back to her slightly and crouched down. "Climb on, I'll carry you inside." "What? I couldn't possibly..." Ma'am, with all due respect, your feet are torn up, you're shaking badly, and that attacker knew your name, which means this isn't over. Let me help you. There was a pause, a moment of internal debate that Garrett could feel even without seeing her face. Then small hands gripped his shoulders, and he felt her weight settle onto his back. She was lighter than he had expected, almost fragile feeling despite her height. He stood easily, adjusting his grip under her knees and started walking toward the hotel entrance. Mrs. Kowalski trotted alongside them, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, answering questions about the attacker's description and direction of escape. "I don't even know your name," the woman said quietly, her voice close to his ear. "Garrett Ashford. Vivian Calloway." The name hit him with delayed recognition, a sense that he should know it, and then the pieces clicking into place. Vivian Calloway, CEO of Calloway Capital, one of the most powerful women in American finance. Forbes had profiled her twice. The Wall Street Journal had called her one of the most influential women in business under 40. He had just tackled a mugger to save a billionaire. They reached the hotel entrance, and the doorman, who had apparently been on some kind of break during the actual robbery, came rushing out with wide eyes and stammered apologies. Garrett ignored him and carried Vivian into the lobby, finally setting her down on one of the plush couches near the concierge desk. The concierge himself, a thin man in his 50s, came hurrying over with a first aid kit and a bottle of water. "Miss Calloway, my God, what happened? Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" "I'm fine, Martin." Vivian accepted the water with shaking hands. "Or I will be. This man saved me from a robbery right outside." He stopped the attacker. Martin turned to Garrett with profound gratitude mixed with horror that something like this had happened practically on the hotel's doorstep. "Sir, I cannot thank you enough. If there's anything we can do—" "Just make sure she's okay," Garrett interrupted. "And the police are on their way. They'll want to talk to both of us." He glanced at his phone, checking the time. Already past 1 in the morning. He had promised Kieran's babysitter, his sister Sutton, that he would be home by 2 at the latest. She had work in the morning. She could not stay all night. But when he looked back at Vivian Calloway, she was staring at him again with that same intense focus. Like she was trying to memorize his face. Like she was trying to figure out some puzzle only she could see. "Please don't leave yet," she said softly. "Not until the police come. I need to understand what's happening, and you're the first person tonight who's made me feel safe." Garrett hesitated, thinking about Sutton and the time and his exhaustion, but then he saw the barely concealed fear still lurking behind Vivian's composed exterior. She was holding it together through sheer force of will, but she was not okay. Not yet. "I'll stay," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Until the police come." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you." The police arrived 20 minutes later. Detective Alejandra Reyes was a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and the kind of focused attention that marked her as someone who took her job seriously. She took statements from everyone, starting with Vivian and working through Garrett, Mrs. Kowalski, and even Martin the concierge. The process took almost an hour. Detective Reyes was thorough, asking detailed questions about the attacker's appearance, his escape route, his exact words. Garrett gave her everything he could remember, including the fact that the attacker had left his jacket behind. "This wasn't random," Garrett said when he finished his account. "He knew her name, said her company owed him. This was targeted, Detective." Reyes nodded grimly. "We'll investigate. Miss Calloway, I'll need you to compile a list of anyone who might have a grievance against you or your company. Business rivals, terminated employees, failed investors, anyone with motive." After the police left, Vivian approached Garrett. Her composure had returned somewhat, the CEO mask sliding back into place, but Garrett could still see the cracks. "You served," she said. It was not a question. "Military. I can tell by how you moved. how you handled that situation. That's not something civilians do. Army, 12 years. Captain, infantry. Why did you leave? The question was personal, especially from a stranger. But something about the way she asked it, genuinely curious rather than nosy, made Garrett answer honestly. My wife got sick. Cancer. She needed me home, not deployed halfway around the world. So I resigned my commission and came back to take care of her and our son. Vivian's expression softened with immediate understanding. I'm so sorry. Is she... She passed. It was aggressive. Fast at the end. But we had some good time together before. And now you're driving rideshare to support your son. I do what needs doing. Security consulting when I can get it. Rideshare fills the gaps. Whatever keeps food on the table and a roof over our heads. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those intelligent eyes. Then she made a decision that Garrett could see forming in her expression even before she spoke. Mr. Ashford, 6 months ago, someone broke into Callaway Capital and planted surveillance devices in our server room. They collected data for weeks before we discovered them. Client information, deal structures, security protocols. Since then, I've been receiving threats. Tonight was the first physical attack. You need to tell Detective Reyes. I have. The police have found nothing. But you... She reached into the purse that Garrett had rescued, pulling out a business card. Callaway Capital needs a new head of security. Someone who can assess threats, protect our people, and handle situations exactly like tonight. The position comes with a salary of $120,000 annually, full benefits, and the chance to use your actual skills again. Garrett stared at the card, then at her. You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. I know you ran toward danger when everyone else would have run away. I know you prioritized my safety over catching the attacker. And I know that whoever targeted me tonight isn't finished. She pressed the card into his hand. Monday, 10 a.m. At least hear me out properly before you decide. Garrett thought about Kieran, sleeping peacefully at home. Thought about the mounting bills and the exhaustion and the gray existence of driving in circles while his skills rusted away. I'll be there, he said. Monday morning arrived with all the weight of new beginnings. Garrett stood in the lobby of Callaway Capital's 30-story tower, wearing the suit he had last worn at Corinne's funeral. The security guard checked his name and nodded with unexpected deference. Miss Callaway is expecting you, Mr. Ashford. 28th floor. The elevator rose through Seattle's skyline, and Garrett watched the city spread out below him. A world of power and money he had never expected to enter. Vivian's office commanded 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows. She stood behind a massive desk, transformed from the shaken woman in a torn dress to a corporate titan in a charcoal gray suit. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her posture was perfect. This was CEO Vivian Callaway, and she was formidable. The position oversees 8 security personnel, coordinates with law enforcement, and ensures the physical safety of 300 employees. She began without preamble. Salary is $120,000 annually, plus benefits and performance bonuses. There's also a signing bonus of $10,000. Numbers that would change his life. Numbers that would mean Kieran could have new shoes whenever he needed them. That they could move out of their cramped apartment. That Garrett could stop working 80-hour weeks just to stay afloat. What's the catch, he asked. The catch is that you work for me, and I have exacting standards. I expect excellence, not mediocrity. I expect problems solved before they become crises. I expect loyalty, discretion, and absolute professionalism. Her eyes met his directly. Can you deliver that? Yes. Tell me why I should believe you. Garrett straightened, letting Captain Ashford emerge. Because everything I've done for 15 years has been about protecting people. I kept soldiers alive through 3 combat deployments. I made decisions under fire that saved lives. And I'm hungry Not for power or status, but for the chance to do work that matters again. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. When do you start? Now. 2 weeks into his new job, Garrett made a decision that surprised even himself. Kieran, there's someone I want you to meet. His 9-year-old son looked up from his homework with intelligent, observant eyes, too old for his age in the way children who have lost parents often become. Is it someone from work? Sort of. She's my boss, and she's become a friend. Vivian arrived at their small apartment that afternoon, visibly nervous in a way that seemed foreign on her. Garrett had never seen the powerful CEO look uncertain before. She stood in his modest living room, clearly out of place among the second-hand furniture and Kieran's scattered toys, yet somehow trying desperately to fit. Kieran studied the visitor with intense focus. He watched how Vivian moved, how she spoke, how she looked at his father. 10 minutes passed in near silence while the boy conducted his evaluation. Finally, he spoke. You're different from the other adults who want things from Dad. Vivian blinked in surprise. How so? Kieran tilted his head, considering. Most people look at Dad like he's useful, like a tool they can use. You look at him like he's a person. He paused, his young face serious. Mom used to say the best people are the ones who see the whole you, not just the parts they need. Vivian's composure cracked. Her eyes glistened with unexpected tears. Your mom sounds like she was very wise. She was the smartest person I ever knew, Kieran said matter-of-factly. But Dad says you're pretty smart too. So maybe you can help me with my science project? Dad's terrible at the hypothesis part. I am not terrible at... You kind of are, Dad. Kieran grinned, bright and mischievous and full of love. That was the moment Garrett knew something had shifted, not just in his life, but in his heart. Clifford Brennan, Garrett's 62-year-old deputy and former homicide detective, spread documents across the conference table 3 days later. His weathered face was grim. I've been digging into the surveillance breach from 6 months ago, Cliff said. The tech used was military grade. Expensive. Only a few companies manufacture it. Let me guess. One of them has ties to Maximilian Blackwood. His brother, actually. Dorian Blackwood served time 5 years ago for stalking and corporate espionage. He has connections to a private security firm that supplies exactly this equipment. Vivian joined them, her expression matching Cliff's grimness. Maximilian has been trying to acquire Callaway Capital for years. Every time I beat him on a major deal, his offers become more aggressive. I beat him on the Henderson acquisition last month. Cost him $50 million in projected revenue. There's more, Cliff said heavily. I pulled records on the Henderson deal. 3 days before the final bid, someone accessed your sealed proposal from inside the building. The breach came from an executive account. He slid a photograph across the table. Theodore Marsh, your chief financial officer. Vivian's face went pale. Teddy, he's been with me for 8 years. He received $300,000 from an offshore account 2 weeks after you won the Henderson deal. The account traces back to Blackwood Ventures. He was selling my strategies to Maximilian? Looks that way, and Miss Callaway. Cliff hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what came next. There's evidence he's been feeding information about your security protocols, your schedule, your habits. The attack Friday night? Someone knew exactly where you'd be and when. Vivian sank into a chair, the color draining from her face. Teddy set me up to be attacked. We don't have proof he knew about the physical threat, Garrett said carefully. But he's been compromising your company for money. At minimum, what do? We don't tip him off. We build a case, and we find out exactly how deep this goes. The threatening call came 3 days later. Garrett's phone rang at 3 p.m. Unknown number. When he answered, a distorted electronic voice filled his ear. Tell Calloway she can't hide behind bodyguards forever. What she took from Blackwood, we'll take from her and everyone she cares about, including that little boy you're so fond of." The line went dead. Garrett's vision went red. Not just corporate espionage, not just threats against Vivian. They were threatening Kieran. He found Vivian in her office and played the recording. Her face went pale, then hardened with fury. "They mentioned your son," she whispered. "Garrett, they know about Kieran." "I know. We need to increase security at his school. I'll pay for private protection. This isn't your burden to carry." "Yes, it is." Her voice cracked with emotion she rarely showed. "You took this job to protect me, and now your son is in danger because of my business enemies. That's exactly my burden." That night, Vivian stayed at Garrett's apartment, not for romance, for safety. He could not protect her and Kieran if they were in separate locations. Kieran, far from being upset by the unexpected house guest, was delighted. He insisted on building an elaborate blanket fort in the living room, complete with pillow barricades and strategic escape routes. "It's a security fortress," he explained with 9-year-old seriousness. "See, you can only enter through the front, and I've positioned pillows as early warning systems." Vivian examined the construction with equal seriousness. "Impressive tactical thinking, but have you considered a secondary exit route?" They worked together for an hour, the CEO and the child, reinforcing the fort and debating defensive strategies. Garrett watched from the kitchen doorway, something warm spreading through his chest that he had forgotten he could feel. Later, as Kieran drifted off to sleep inside his fortress, he mumbled something that made both adults freeze. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I think Miss Vivian is scared, not of bad guys, of being alone." He yawned, eyes already closing. "Mom used to say the bravest people are the ones who let other people love them. Maybe we can be brave for her." Garrett met Vivian's eyes across the dim room. She had heard every word. And she was crying silently, tears tracking down her face in the soft glow of the nightlight. Cliff burst into Garrett's office 4 days later, with a USB drive clutched in his hand and an expression that promised earth-shattering news. "I found it. Everything." Theodore Marsh wasn't just selling information. He was orchestrating the entire campaign against Miss Calloway. "How did you find all this?" Garrett asked, his jaw tight. "Theodore Marsh was sloppy," Cliff explained. "When we cloned his work computer during a routine security audit, we found he'd been using the same email account for years. He never deleted anything. Years of correspondence, just sitting there waiting to be discovered." The files were damning. Marsh had been working with Maximilian Blackwood for 2 years. The surveillance devices, the leaked strategies, the threats, even the robbery attempt. Marsh had provided Vivian's schedule to Dorian Blackwood, who had hired a man named Bryce Cortland to attack her. "But there's something else," Cliff said grimly. "Something worse." He pulled up an email chain from years ago. Garrett read the contents and the world tilted beneath him. The emails were between Theodore Marsh and someone at a pharmaceutical company called Meridian Health. They discussed the Ashford situation. Specifically, they discussed Corinne Ashford's participation in an experimental cancer treatment program. "What is this?" Garrett's voice was barely a whisper. "Your wife was enrolled in a trial for a new cancer treatment," Cliff explained carefully. "The company running it had financial ties to Blackwood Ventures. When Corinne's cancer initially went into remission, she started asking questions about the trial, about whether the results were being manipulated for investment purposes, about whether patients were being used as pawns in a stock manipulation scheme. She found something. We don't know what exactly, but 2 weeks after she raised concerns with the research team, her cancer came back, aggressively. The doctors couldn't explain the speed of deterioration." Garrett felt the ground disappear beneath him. He had believed his wife died of natural causes. Tragic, but natural. the cruel randomness of disease taking someone far too young. Now he was staring at evidence suggesting she might have been silenced, and the same network threatening Vivian was connected to her death. "I need proof," Garrett said, his voice hard as steel. "Solid proof. Something that will hold up in court." "That's what I'm working on." "But Garrett," Cliff placed a hand on his shoulder, "if this is true, these people killed your wife to protect their investment scheme. They'll kill again to stay hidden. Then we make sure they can't hide anymore." The plan came together over the next 72 hours. The annual Blackwood Foundation Gala was scheduled for Saturday night. 500 of Seattle's most powerful people would be in attendance. Media coverage, live streaming, Maximilian Blackwood himself giving a keynote speech about ethical investing and charitable responsibility. "That's where we expose them," Garrett said. "Publicly, completely, in front of everyone who matters." "That's where we destroy them," Vivian agreed. Detective Reyes agreed to position FBI agents at the venue, ready to move once the evidence was presented. Garrett worked with Vivian's tech team to compile everything: documents, financial records, audio recordings, the emails about Corinne's treatment. The night before the gala, Kieran found Garrett sitting alone in the kitchen at midnight. "You're thinking about Mom," Kieran said, climbing onto the chair beside his father. Not a question, a statement of fact from a boy who had learned to read his father's silences. "Yeah, buddy, I am." Kieran was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his young voice carrying wisdom far beyond his years. "Mom used to say that the truth is like water. You can try to hold it back, but eventually it finds a way through." He looked at his father with that steady gaze that saw far too much for a 9-year-old. "She'd want you to let it through, Dad. Even if it hurts." Garrett pulled his son into a fierce hug, holding him tight against the fear and the anger and the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. "When did you get so smart? I learned from watching you and Mom. You guys always did the hard thing when it was the right thing." The Blackwood Foundation Gala was held in the grand ballroom of Seattle's most prestigious hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across 500 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Champagne flowed freely. Laughter and conversation filled the air. The elite of Seattle society gathered to celebrate philanthropy and congratulate themselves on their generosity. None of them knew that their world was about to collapse. Garrett entered in a rented tuxedo, Vivian stunning beside him in emerald green silk. Security credentials got them past the checkpoints. Cliff waited in the tech booth with the presentation loaded and ready. Theodore Marsh was there, smiling, networking, shaking hands with the very people he had been betraying for years, completely unaware that the walls were closing in. Maximilian Blackwood took the stage at 9 p.m. precisely, silver-haired and distinguished, radiating the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. He smiled at the crowd like a benevolent king addressing his subjects. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Blackwood Foundation has always stood for one thing above all others: integrity in business, ethics in investment, the belief that success and morality can walk hand in hand." "That's an interesting choice of words." Vivian's voice cut through the ballroom like a knife, amplified by the microphone she had taken from a startled server. "Given that you've built your empire on fraud, theft, and possibly murder." 500 people gasped as one. Maximilian's face went from polished confidence to barely contained fury in a heartbeat. "Security, remove this woman immediately." But the screens behind him had already changed. Cliff had hijacked the presentation system. Documents appeared on every screen in the ballroom. Financial records showing the surveillance campaign against Callaway Capital, Theodore Marsh's offshore payments, the corporate espionage scheme in damning detail. Then the audio recording played, the distorted voice echoing through speakers. "Tell Callaway she can't hide behind bodyguards forever. What she took from Blackwood will take from her. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Phones appeared everywhere as guests began recording the spectacle. That's not all, Vivian continued, her voice steady and clear. A woman named Corinne Ashford discovered irregularities in a clinical trial funded by Blackwood Ventures. She was asking questions about stock manipulation using cancer patients as pawns. Vivian paused, letting the words sink in. 2 weeks after she raised concerns, her cancer returned with unusual aggression. She died within months. New documents appeared on the screens, emails, payment records, the pharmaceutical connection laid bare. Theodore Marsh, your trusted CFO, Vivian pointed directly at the man trying to edge toward the exit, coordinated with Blackwood Associates to ensure Corinne Ashford never talked, to ensure I never discovered the truth, to ensure that anyone who threatened Blackwood profits was eliminated. Theodore Marsh broke into a run, shoving past shocked socialites toward the service exit. But the FBI had been watching him all night. Agents had been positioned at every door since the presentation began. He made it approximately 15 feet before two agents in formal wear stepped into his path, badges gleaming. Theodore Marsh, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corporate espionage, securities fraud, and accessory to criminal medical malpractice. Maximilian Blackwood stood frozen on stage, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He tried to speak, to spin, to salvage something from the disaster. This is ridiculous, fabricated evidence. My lawyers will... Your lawyers can't help you. Detective Reyes stepped forward, her badge gleaming in the chandelier light. Maximilian Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, stalking, criminal threatening, and will be investigating additional charges related to the death of Corinne Ashford. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, in front of 500 witnesses, in front of cameras streaming live to the internet, in front of the entire world he had tried to dominate through lies and violence. Garrett watched the man who might have been responsible for Corinne's death being led away in disgrace. It was not closure, not yet. The investigation would take months, maybe years, but it was justice beginning to flow. Vivian appeared at his side, taking his hand in hers. Whatever we find out about Corinne, she said quietly, we find it together. You're not alone in this anymore. 1 week after the gala, Seattle was still buzzing with the scandal. Maximilian Blackwood was denied bail. Theodore Marsh was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. The investigation into medical malpractice had expanded to include 5 additional suspicious cases. Dorian Blackwood and Bryce Cortland had both been arrested. Justice was not complete. It might never be complete. But it was moving forward. Garrett found Vivian in her office late one evening, staring out at the city lights that sparkled like earthbound stars. The board approved the restructuring, she said without turning. Chief Security Officer position, reporting directly to them instead of to me. It's yours if you want it. You're promoting me to make our relationship less complicated? Vivian turned, a smile playing at her lips. A real smile, the kind he had rarely seen on her face before all of this began. I'm promoting you because you're exceptional at your job. The relationship complication is just a fortunate bonus. Garrett crossed the room and took her hands in his. Vivian, I need to say something. If you're going to tell me we should wait, that it's too soon, that I love you, she stopped breathing. Not because you helped me find answers about Corinne, Garrett continued. Not because we face danger together. I love you because you're brilliant and fierce and surprisingly terrible at making coffee. I love you because when I'm with you, I feel like the man I was before everything fell apart. Vivian's tears fell freely. I love you too. I've been afraid to say it. Afraid you'd think I was trying to replace her. You're not replacing anyone. You're not Corinne. You're Vivian. And I want to build something new with you, something that belongs to us alone. She kissed him then, standing before the windows of the empire she had built, with nothing left between them but honesty. 1 year later, spring arrived in Seattle with cherry blossoms and hope. The Corinne Ashford Foundation for Medical Ethics launched on a sunny April afternoon. The nonprofit would investigate clinical trial fraud and protect patients from predatory medical practices. It would ensure that what happened to Corinne would never happen to another family. Garrett stood with Vivian in the garden of the new foundation headquarters, her hand in his, a simple platinum band now on her ring finger. Kieran raced through the flower beds, chasing butterflies and shouting updates to anyone who would listen. "Dad, Mom, I almost caught one. They're really fast." Mom, he had started using the word 3 months ago, hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty, not replacing Corinne, adding to the love. Sutton appeared with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Kieran. "This is incredible," she said, looking at the building. "Corinne would have loved this." "She would have been first through the doors," Garrett agreed, demanding to review every case file personally. Vivian squeezed his hand. "She sounds like someone I would have been honored to know." Later that afternoon, Garrett drove them to downtown Seattle, to a corner outside the Meridian Grand Hotel. "Why are we here?" Kieran asked, pressing his face against the car window. "This is where I met your stepmother," Garrett said, "right there on that crosswalk." Vivian stepped out of the car, her emerald dress catching the spring sunlight. She walked to the exact spot where she had fallen that night 1 year ago, the spot where a stranger had run toward her instead of away. Garrett joined her, taking her hand. "I was so scared that night," Vivian said softly. "And then you appeared, this random rideshare driver who turned out to be everything I didn't know I needed. I thought I was just helping a stranger." Garrett smiled. "Turns out I was meeting my future wife." Kieran bounded over to join them, squeezing between his parents. "So this is where our family started? Right here on this boring street corner?" "This boring street corner," Vivian said, ruffling his hair, "is where everything changed." They stood together, father, mother, son, on the spot where fate had brought two broken people together and given them a chance to become whole. Kieran looked up at Vivian with quiet certainty. "Hey, Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "I've been thinking about something." He scuffed his shoe on the ground, the way he always did when working up courage. "My first mom, she's still my mom. She'll always be my mom." "Of course she will," Vivian said softly. "But she told me something once. She said that love isn't about finding someone who makes the hurt go away. It's about finding someone who makes the hurt worth carrying." Kieran looked up with that steady gaze. "I think you make Dad's hurt worth carrying. And I think we make yours worth carrying too." Vivian dropped to her knees and pulled Kieran into a fierce embrace, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. "I love you so much," she whispered into his hair. "Both of you, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." "I know," Kieran said with the simple confidence of a child who has never doubted he is loved. "That's why it works." Garrett looked at them. His son and the woman who had become his wife. His family forged through loss and danger and the courage to start again. The investigation into Corinne's death was ongoing. They might never have complete answers. They might never know exactly what happened in those final months. But they had each other. They had justice moving forward. They had a foundation that would protect others. And they had love. The kind that doesn't erase pain but makes it bearable. The kind that doesn't replace what was lost but builds something new from what remains. A butterfly landed on Kieran's outstretched hand, its wings shimmering blue in the spring sunlight. "Look," he whispered reverently, "it's not scared of me." "Butterflies land on people who have gentle hearts," Vivian said. Kieran smiled. "I think Mom sent it. My first mom. I think she wanted us to know she's happy, that we're allowed to be happy too. Garrett felt tears slide down his face. Not tears of grief this time, tears of gratitude. Tears of finally understanding that loving again was not a betrayal of what came before. It was a continuation. It was a gift. It was what Corinne would have wanted all along. The butterfly took flight, joining dozens of others dancing above the Seattle street where everything had begun. And Garrett Ashford, who had once believed his life ended the day his wife died, watched it go with a heart that was finally, completely full. Some rescues happen in a single moment. A tackle on a dark street, a man running toward danger when everyone else runs away. But other rescues take longer. They happen slowly, day by day, as broken people learn to trust again. As lonely hearts find their way home. As families are built not from blood, but from choice, from courage, from the simple, stubborn refusal to let the darkness win. Garrett had saved Vivian's life that night outside the Meridian Grand Hotel, but she had saved him right back. And standing on that same street corner 1 year later, surrounded by the family they had built together, both of them finally understood the truth. The best rescues are the ones that go both ways. The end.